They took everything: the apartment, the job, the freedom to move, to speak, to think out loud. They took the newspaper that told the truth and replaced it with one that did not. They took the future and replaced it with a plan that had nothing to do with what you wanted. And then they waited for the person to break, for the silence inside to become louder than the noise outside. Most people broke. Some did not. The ones who did not were not stronger. They were not braver. They were not made from different material. They had a different architecture inside their minds, built deliberately, maintained daily, refined under pressure until it was stronger than the pressure applied to it. Viktor Frankl survived Auschwitz, not physically only. He emerged, not diminished, but deepened. Having developed inside the worst conditions, the 20th century produced a complete understanding of what the human mind requires to remain functional under total external control. He wrote it down. Aleksandr Solzhenitsyn survived 8 years in the Soviet Gulag and wrote one of the most important documents in the history of human resistance, not a political manifesto but a psychological one. A precise account of how the mind either surrenders or maintains itself inside a system designed to destroy individual identity. Varlam Shalamov survived 17 years in Kolyma. His accounts are field reports from the most extreme psychological survival experiment ever conducted on human beings. These 3 men did not share politics, religion, or nationality. They shared a set of psychological techniques that allowed the mind to remain functional, and in some cases to grow, under conditions that destroyed most of the people around them. Those techniques are not historical curiosities. They are applicable today, and in a world where the systems surrounding modern people are increasingly designed to produce anxiety and compliance, they are more relevant than they have ever been. Stay with me, because number 4 on this list is the most counterintuitive psychological survival technique documented by Gulag survivors, a method that sounds like defeat, but functions as the most powerful resistance available to a person whose external circumstances cannot be changed. Let's begin. Number 1. The radical reduction of the control horizon. The first thing a system of total control does is make you feel responsible for everything you cannot change. The weather of politics, the decisions of people with power over you, the direction of forces that were moving before you were born and will continue moving after you are gone. The system makes you feel these things as personal failures, as evidence of your own inadequacy, as problems that you should be solving but cannot. This is not accidental. The psychological weight of responsibility without agency, of feeling accountable for outcomes you cannot influence, is one of the most effective mechanisms of control ever developed. Solzhenitsyn identified this in the Gulag with mathematical precision. The prisoners who deteriorated fastest were not the ones facing the harshest conditions. They were the ones who continued directing their mental energy toward the things they could not control: the unjust sentence, the absent family, the world outside the wire, the decisions of authorities who had no interest in their perspective. The prisoners who survived longest and maintained the most functional inner state had made a deliberate and disciplined decision. They had reduced their control horizon to the immediate, not to the year, not to the month, not even to the week, to today, to this hour, to what is directly in front of them and what can be done about it right now. This is not passivity. It is the opposite of passivity. It is the active, disciplined refusal to spend psychological resources on things that will not respond to those resources. The man who cannot control whether the sentence is just can control whether he does his work with precision today. The man who cannot control the cold can control whether he uses the warmth available to him efficiently. The reduction of the control horizon is not giving up. It is the allocation of a finite resource, mental energy, toward the problems that will actually respond to it. Modern people distribute their mental energy across an unlimited horizon of things they cannot control. The news cycle, the economy, other people's decisions. All of it consuming the same resource needed for the problems directly in front of them. The man in the Gulag who accepted that he was in the Gulag could begin solving the actual problems in front of him. The man who continued fighting the fact of the Gulag consumed the energy needed for those solutions on a battle already lost. The job is gone. The system is failing. The situation is unjust. Accept it completely. Direct the energy freed by that acceptance toward the actual problems that remain. This is not defeat. This is the beginning of functional resistance. Number 5. The interior life as unconquerable territory. The final and most profound technique documented across every source from the Iron Curtain psychological survival literature is this: the system can control everything outside you. It cannot reach inside. Frankl wrote about this from Auschwitz. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is the human capacity to choose a response. In that choice is the last freedom that no external power can remove. They took the body. They could not take the mind that observed the body and chose how to interpret the experience. Soviet dissidents maintained rich interior lives, reading committed to memory because books were confiscated, music heard internally because instruments were taken, relationships conducted in imagination because people were separated. A woman in a Soviet labor camp memorized hundreds of poems over years because the authorities could search her cell and find nothing to confiscate. The poetry was inside her. Inaccessible, untouchable. She was not broken. She was armored. The interior life, cultivation of thought, imagination, sustained mental activity for its own sake, is not a luxury. It is the last and most durable refuge a human being possesses inside a system that has taken everything else. Modern people outsource their interior lives to screens. Continuous external stimulation fills the interior space and prevents the development of the physiological architecture that space, when cultivated, provides. Develop that capacity before you need it as a refuge. Because the moment you need it as a refuge, you will not have time to develop it. Here is what all of this means. Every previous video in this series covered the physical infrastructure of survival. Food, water, heat, light, shelter, communication, medicine, economics. All of it necessary. None of it sufficient. The people who survived the Iron Curtain with their humanity intact were not the ones with the best physical preparation. They were the ones who understood that the most critical survival infrastructure is the mind that decides what to do with everything else. A mind that has collapsed under pressure cannot use the food, cannot organize the water, cannot maintain the fire. The physical preparation is the body of survival. This video is the mind. You cannot have one without the other and expect either to hold. Viktor Frankl emerged from Auschwitz and wrote a book that has sold 16 million copies in 40 languages. He did not write it despite what he experienced. He wrote it because of it. The system tried to break him. It made him unbreakable instead. That is the final lesson from behind the Iron Curtain. The system does not get to decide what you become. Only you do. The Gulag survivors did not have the luxury of this waste. Neither do you, if you are serious about functioning effectively inside a system not designed for your benefit. Number 2. The routine as psychological architecture. Viktor Frankl observed that prisoners who maintained routine, who imposed structure on their days even when the structure had no practical purpose, survived at higher rates than those who did not. Routine creates the experience of agency. When you do the same thing at the same time in the same way, you are making a decision. The act of making and executing a decision, of being the agent of an action rather than the subject of a system's action, maintains the psychological structures the system is trying to dissolve. A Polish dissident, questioned by the security services, returned home and did not collapse into crisis. He made tea at the same time he always made tea. Read for the same hour he always read. Went to sleep at the same time he always went to sleep. Not because he was unaffected. Because the maintenance of routine was the maintenance of the self that the questioning had attempted to destabilize. The routine said, "You did not change me." It is the most powerful thing a person can say to a system trying to change them, and it requires no words. Number 3. The manufactured meaning system. Frankl's core insight was simple and devastating. A person can endure almost any condition if they have a reason to endure it. A person without a reason disintegrates at conditions. A person with meaning can sustain indefinitely. This is not mysticism. Frankl observed it in Auschwitz. Shalamov observed it in Kolyma. Every extreme survival situation in the 20th century consistently supports it. Behind the Iron Curtain, the official meaning system, the communist project, the workers' paradise, deteriorated, as evidence against it accumulated. People who had invested their psychological sustenance in that official meaning collapsed when it failed. The people who survived psychologically intact had constructed parallel meaning systems, private, internal, independent of the official narrative. The writer who continued writing in secret even though publication was impossible, because the writing was the meaning, not the publication. The parent who organized their entire inner life around the survival of their children, not as sacrifice but as chosen purpose the system could not reach. These were not naive optimists. They were architects of interior meaning who had understood, with the clarity that only genuine adversity produces, that meaning is not found. It is built, deliberately, with the same intentionality you would apply to any other construction project. Stop here. What is the meaning system that sustains you? Not the one you inherited. The one you have deliberately constructed and can articulate clearly. If you cannot answer this question in under 60 seconds, you do not have one that will hold under pressure. The pressure does not announce itself. It arrives without warning. The time to build is before it arrives. Write in the comments, what is the one thing that would keep you functioning if everything else was taken away? Number 4. The acceptance of the unacceptable. This is the counterintuitive one, and the most powerful. Every person facing a system of control or a situation of extreme adversity reaches a moment where the gap between reality and expectation becomes too large to bridge. The sentence is unjust. The system is corrupt. The outcome is unfair. The situation is wrong. All of these things can be simultaneously true and simultaneously unchangeable. The psychologically fatal response is continued resistance to the reality of the situation, the ongoing, energy-consuming refusal to accept what is, in favor of what should be. Shalamov documented this in Kolyma with brutal precision. The prisoners who spent mental energy on the injustice of their situation, who continued internally contesting the verdict, arguing against the system, deteriorated faster than those who had moved through that stage and reached acceptance. Acceptance is not agreement. This distinction is critical. To accept a situation is not to say it is just. It is to say, this is the reality I am operating within, and I will now direct my energy toward operating within it effectively rather than contesting its existence.